Welcome everyone, this is Monique from Cosmic Alchemy, and I'm so glad to have you here. Today I want to talk about um, how I personally love to use astrology and why I like to use astrology as a tool for living and embodying and also understanding myself better versus the uh, versus a tool for prediction or um, fortune telling. I think a lot of you out there who are either into astrology for personal reasons, professional reasons, anyways, but also who are maybe just getting into understanding what astrology can really do. Um, I have studied astrology now for the past 7 years, more so in the direction of modern and evolutionary astrology. And I have now, for the past 3 months, started to study professional Hellenistic astrology. So I am studying currently. Um, For me, it's almost like full-time study because I take two different um, levels of Hellenistic astrology at the same time. And while doing so, I'm doing my own self-study and I continue to study tarot with it in connection. I wish I could show you. Oh, I wish I could show you my book, but the laptop is standing on it. Well, I bought a new book, Tarot Correspondences from T. Susan Chang. And if you don't know her work, I just love her very in-depth tarot work. Um, I heard about her work from Benebell Ven, who is also amazing in everything I Ching and tarot. And so I bought this book because although I have previously studied the correspondences between tarot and astrology and also herbalism, because I do love some herbalism in between. For you know that I love herbal tea because this whole channel is kind of also on the herbal tea side. So, anyways, um, and so I got this book, and oh my gosh, this is like a Capricorn's rising's dream. Thank you, T. Susan Chang. Anyways, where do I begin? I know that astrology is very misunderstood, and so are surely a lot of other spiritual practices. But when it comes to astrology, a lot of people know the sun sign horoscope astrology that you know from the magazines and from the newspapers. You have your sun sign, and there's a tiny paragraph written up about how your day is going. And it could literally fit onto anyone, which is why you resonate with it. And then there are people they don't resonate with it at all. Up until, I don't even want to say, I think up until maybe 15 years ago, I thought astrology was totally bullshit. But it's important to be able to change your mind because that's what growth is. Um, I thought it was bullshit not because I didn't believe it could hold anything valuable, but because I didn't know the system behind why there's a sun sign astrology. So I knew the sun sign astrology, the horoscopes, basically, the newspaper horoscopes. It's called that way. And from there, I kind of just like at that time in my home country in Germany, I feel like there was no information beyond that. As in um what astrology is, where to find information. I didn't like there weren't any public astrologers that you like I wouldn't know that like I know a lot of my Spanish friends who would tell me about astrologers on TV. And I'm like, I don't think I've ever seen an astrologer on TV in Germany. Like, and maybe I have just not watched enough TV. That could very well be the case because I just don't think I've ever watched TV a lot. And I don't have a TV anymore since 2012. So, yeah. Now, how I got to astrology, it's interesting because I took kind of like a reroute to begin with. So I met, sometimes I have to remember how to start these stories. If you don't know me and my background, um, sometimes the stories you will hear from me may not make any sense, nor will you believe some of these stories. And that's totally okay. You don't have to, but they did all happen. And so, in the past 20 years, I have traveled extensively. I traveled solo to like 45 countries. And when I still had a full-time job in Germany, I would take every single day of my time off that I had to travel. And usually this would be for 2 or 3 weeks every 6 months. So I would plan it out so I would be able to go at the beginning of winter and at the end of winter. So for me, so I wouldn't have to spend so much time in winter in Germany because I do not like it. Um, and by the time I would travel as far away from Germany as I could. So my destinations were something like, and maybe it doesn't sound far for you, but like I have been also the very first person in my extended family to travel, first of all, solo, outside of any like all-inclusive hotels, and then outside of Europe for like, yeah, backpacking and off the beaten path kind of trips as well. And so most like there's maybe one other person in my family who would travel, but that was usually all inclusive, very luxurious kind of trips to like New York and wherever you would find luxury, which I haven't done at all. Um, wasn't interested in. And so I have traveled to like Morocco and India and China, Cambodia, Vietnam, and really places that would have been far off from Germany and also not the on top of most people's travel lists, at least not the people that I knew, and also not really the official German travel list kind of thing. Anyways, just to say, I think it was 2011 or 2012 that I traveled to China. And I traveled to China and Hong Kong. And I visited Shanghai for a little bit longer, like longer as in like a whole week, because I know when people travel to cities like this, they often stay just a few days. But I was there a whole week, and I made it a point to travel. It's a whole other story. To travel like by local bus to like fisher villages outside of Shanghai. That took me like 2, 3 hours to get there, and I didn't speak the language of it. Like, anyways, I have a trilogy of books of travel stories in me. Needless to say, long story short, I went to a pretty famous temple in Shanghai, and they have what they call it an eternal flame. And so this is like an open fire, and the fire was burning, and um, the eternal flame is not to be erased or to stop burning, basically, which is why it's called the eternal flame. And so there was a monastery at the back of the temple where monks are living. And so the monks just had a chanting hour and they came out of the temple. And I would sit in front of the eternal flame. But when monks are coming, you're standing up to show respect. At least that's how I learned it. And so I stood up and they passed by me. The whole group of monks passed by me. I bowed. And so one of the last monks, he suddenly stood still and stepped out of the group and turned around and stepped towards me, which was kind of scary because why would he do that? And he looked into my eyes and he said something along the lines like, I see it in your eyes. You're a fire tiger. Live like it. And then he turned around and followed the other monks, and they turned a corner into a long hallway. And I stood there for a second. I was like, oh my God, I have to go ask questions. And so I ran after them. And it wasn't like far. It was like maybe a few steps, right? And I turned the corner and the whole group of monks was gone. And I was like, because they couldn't have gone anywhere and they would have needed to sprint down the whole hallway in order for me to not see them anywhere because it was a long hallway to get to the end of it into the entrance of the monastery from the temple. So it was the hallway connecting the monastery and the temple. And there was no door, no other way to go. And I was just a little bamboozled as to where this whole group of monks suddenly disappeared to. Anyways, that was the very first time I heard anything about my Chinese zodiac. So I went on, I was like, okay, I went to the bookstore of the temple and I asked the staff, the member of staff there, about the fire tiger, and she showed me a little flyer and a mini booklet, and I read a little bit about it. And um, it was only like partly in English and the rest in Chinese, and so I was, of course, a little I was so anxious to learn more about it. So I didn't get that book. I wish I had, honestly, but I didn't get that book, and I went back to the hotel later that day after my explorations and after lunch and everything. And so I started to look up on the internet. Now, what you need to know is that in China, there is no Google, there is no YouTube, nothing. They have for everything a different version of their own uh, search engine, video website, everything, right? Um, so I I had to kind of go to the hotel reception because I didn't know how to use these websites. They're all in Chinese. They don't have translators there. Um, Not like Google translators, nothing. And if everything is in Chinese, you can't translate anything. You don't know where to click, what to do, what to type. And so I was like, I'm trying to find out some information. And they're like, you cannot use the other internet sites. Like you can go to Brisbane. I'm like, okay, but can you maybe help me type this in and so I can read a little bit? Maybe there's some English information. They were so kind. They were so helpful. So they found a website in China that also had English descriptions. Not very well because it was 2012 and it doesn't sound like super old, but still it wasn't yet very necessary for China as well to have English descriptions for things. I guess that's my guess. Anyway, so I found that and I read a little bit more about it. And then the other day, when there was no um, when there was no one in the hotel lobby, that same guy actually offered me to explain some things about it. I was like, oh my God, yeah. So he told me about the Chinese zodiac and what it means and how it works. And so this was my introduction into any type of astrology. And so I guess the next the next step was for me to learn about Vedic astrology, which is the Indian astrology, because I traveled to India next. And so I learned more about my own astrology in India and having people telling me about my astrology there. And it's really interesting because I feel like I get to different systems of divination and systems of uh, kind of personal exploration from so many different cultures because I traveled so much that before I land at a specific one, like now, I'm using the Hellenistic astrology, which is more Western, still ancient, but is a Western Greek Roman type of astrology, right? And so it's interesting how I took kind of reroutes to get here. Um, yeah, so, but how do I use astrology actually more for embodied living instead of prediction and fortune telling? I think um, the reason why I don't necessarily like to use it for like fortune telling or predictions or whatever. I'm not saying that I wouldn't do forecasts because I think forecasts can be very helpful, but I don't like to look at them as a prediction because when you do a forecast and you do the forecasting well, then you're doing it in a way that it's almost like doing a tarot card reading, right? So if I would do a astrology reading, then I basically lay out the possibilities and options of what could possibly happen in the specific amount of time with all of the topics that are activated for you with specific transits and so on, yada yada. And with a collective included, your environment, everything, right? It's all context. And it's the same as tarot and oracle card readings. So if I would do a reading for you, um, you would certainly be able to understand the reading from my perspective, but also create your own interpretation based on your context and how you perceive the cards. And so, this is the same with astrology because you still have free will in the context of uh, in the context of the creator scheme of life, let's say it this way, because let me not talk about free will right now. I will make a video on this, I guess, but the way I see free will is that we have free will within the means of the limitations of the systems we're living in. And so while some of us have more choices um, to express that free will, some of us don't have as many choices. So then that also means um, if you don't have as many choices or opportunities as someone else, aka you don't have as many privileges as someone else, then you may as not have as many opportunities to express your free will in such a manner as well. That's how I see it. Um, so using astrology as a tool to live embodied, I think to me is the best use because really what you're doing is if you're looking in the future, basically, right? If you're looking at the present right now and at the future moments in time, what transits you have, what aspects they're making, what topics for you or houses are activated, and so on and so on. Then, really, what you're trying to do is to see what paths are opening up for me and how may I best choose which path to walk and um what's the most aligned for me to, yeah, to walk this path basically. And sometimes you may not have a choice. Sometimes there may be a path that's being cut off, and sometimes there's two new opening, and you have to make a choice between those two, but the others are fallen away, or um, like your life is making a sudden U-turn, and it's or you're falling off the cliff. Metaphorically, hopefully. And you just have to learn how to build wings on the way down, I guess. And so, to me, this is a supportive tool to show you what options you may have, how you can use certain planetary influences, and how you may be able to be prepared to react in certain situations. Um, and be less, well, let's say respond in certain situations and be less reactive. That I think that's kind of what I was getting at. Now, if you take this and use it as a tool for learning more about yourself, in hindsight, you can basically learn, okay, what transits happened around those and those type of events, and how did I respond, or how did it kind of influence my life? What what path opened up? Which ones were cut off? Did I fall off the cliff? Um, and you can understand more and learn from those specific events, situations, influences. And also, you know, sometimes there are lessons for us to learn. Not always, but sometimes there are lessons for us to learn. And I feel like with astrology, we can learn the lesson in a more tangible way because with transits and aspects and planetary influences and house types and everything around, it makes it, for me at least, more understandable because there is such a metaphorical illustration of, you know, the storytelling behind it and the mysticism behind it and all of these kind of the myth and the legends behind why certain things mean certain things to get to the point of understanding, oh, okay, this was a story of how, you know, Saturn, for example, um, killed his own father and then was overruled again. And how may that metaphorically impact the time and space where I'm in right now, or the topics? Like, what can I learn from the interpersonal situationships, relationships, experiences from those myths and those legends and those stories, and how may they show up in my life in those situations right now? And what can I learn from this? How could I maybe respond differently? Um, so this is how I believe astrology can be our best mm, guide, our best guide. I think that's a good name. And yeah, to really bring us uh, the most benefits of using astrology. And I think it's also if you use astrology or you are following astrologers online and you feel really anxious and nervous and almost like panicky every time you get an update, then may I suggest that this is not necessarily helpful. You can absolutely unsubscribe from astrology or the special astrologers you're following. You may um, you may look for people who are delivering astrology in a way that soothes your nervous system more. And I don't mean this in a spiritual bypassing kind of way, but more the terminology and whether there's fear mongering or not, because I don't believe we need to fear monger. I do believe we need to be real. I don't believe it needs to be clickbaity and fear mongering and all kind of shocked and uh so yeah, trying to think if there's any more that I wanted to talk about, but I think that's kind of it. Mm, Let me know down below in the comments how you use astrology, if you use it as a prediction tool, um, if you do use it for personal exploration and getting to know yourself better, how you use it. And yeah, I would love to hear from you. Don't forget to like and subscribe because it really helps the channel to grow and we really appreciate it. Until next time, stay weird.